Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and today I'm going to give you the recipe for that third cucumber salad that I talked to you about. Henry and I have been in the kitchen all day today practically. This morning I picked tomatoes, you can tell, and squash and beans, and we had another batch of beans. So we froze beans this morning. And since then I have made two batches of cucumber salad, sunamono, which is a Japanese salad I showed you guys how to do, and the dill salad. But now I am going to do my spicy cucumbers, and I call this my Mediterranean spicy cucumbers. Let me explain how I came by that name. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to chunk up some cucumbers. I found a recipe in the New York Times, and it annoyed me because it was obvious that this was supposed to belong to some specific ethnic group, but it didn't tell me where it came from. And I have no problem with knowing that it's Mediterranean, or it's this, or it's that, or it's the other thing. So I started doing some research, trying to track down where the salad came from, and to be honest, I couldn't do it. I suspect that it's kind of like saying, my grandmother makes apple pie, and every grandmother has a different apple pie recipe. So I think it's one of those kind of recipes where there's a bunch of different places in the general Mediterranean, North Africa area that could sort of take claim to it, but I couldn't find a specific name, to call it by. So I just decided to stick with spicy Mediterranean cucumber salad. It's not really super spicy, but it does have some heat to it because there's red pepper in it. And it's a little different than a bunch of the other ones I make. Instead of cutting little rounds, or what we call coins, it's chunks. So I cut chunks of cucumber that are half an inch to 3/4 of an inch or an inch. I don't want them too giant because they're supposed to be bite size or slightly below bite size. I'm going to do a bunch of these. I've got them in a colander here over a bowl, and I'm going to toss in some salt with it just to help pull a little bit of the moisture out. Now, this salad has sort of a strange story behind it. We've been investigating different spice blends, and fairly recently I noticed that a bunch of these spice blends, which I used to have to go to a specialty store to get, were now available at my local Safeway, which is not exactly what I would call the epitome of radical food consumption. But I had picked up at World Market, which is World Market Cost Plus, depending on where you are in the United States, what's called harissa spice blend. And it's a spice blend that is apparently sort of Middle Eastern, Tunisian, I don't know. A lot of places in the Mediterranean area use something like this. And when I was reading this recipe on the New York Times, I said, wow, that sounds like something Henry might enjoy. Let me see if I have all the ingredients. And I started going through the ingredients, and I said, I've read these ingredients before. And it's going through the whole process of, if you don't have this, then you can do that, and if you don't have this, you can do that. And basically what they have you do, and this is a very common process in Middle Eastern, North African, Indian cooking, that you actually take whole spices and then you roast them and then you use them, because the roasting process brings out the flavors. Awesome. But I looked at this and I said, that's the same thing that's in my harissa spice blend. So basically, by finding this blend, which is now, there's several of these that are now available at any decent grocery store, like in the random spice department section of international spices that they have. I guess it's because they became fashionable. I don't know. I just wanted to try some different flavors and picked this up and found out it matches up exactly with all these different things that are in the recipe. So if I didn't have this spice blend, I could take a bunch of different spices, including coriander and cumin and pepper flakes and stuff, and roast them and do this and do that and do the other thing. I just skipped that whole spot by using the spice blend. And my husband likes it, and that's a good thing because it's another variation on the 9 million ways that I prepare cucumbers for him. As you can see, this is not brain surgery that I'm engaging in here. It's simply slicing up some cucumbers. We've got about 4 cups of cucumbers here, maybe a little less. And they're sitting in a colander in a bowl so that when they drip, they don't drip on my counter. They say stick it in your sink. My sink has dirty dishes because we were busy cooking in here this morning. So I'm going to take a little bit of salt. I'm going to toss it with this, and I'm going to use one hand that's dry to get into the salt, and the other hand that's now wet with cucumber juice. So I'm putting in, although it looks like a lot, it's not. I'm putting in about, they say to put in a teaspoon of salt. And that's about what I was going for in terms of my quantity. So I'm just going to leave this sit here while we do everything else. Except I'm going to wash these hands off now because they're gooey. Well, I might as well get the ends out of here while I'm doing that. Okay, so ingredients. Cucumbers sitting there with a little bit of salt on them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the rest of the things that need to be prepped. It says to use scallions. I don't have any scallions. Last time I used, and this is one of those things when I was going through recipes and I was trying to find something exactly like this, I just wasn't finding anything exactly like this. So I started looking to see what other kinds of ingredients they had, how much variability they were. Like I say, everybody makes apple pie a little bit different. So they said use scallions. Some people said use green onions. Other people said use chives. I happen to have chives, so that's what I'm using. I forgot a bowl. Okay, so I just used a couple of tablespoons of chives last time. So since he liked it that way, that's what I'm going to do again. So I just grabbed out two of my pots of miniature roses have chives growing in them. I didn't plan for them to have chives growing in them. They got in there, and I had planned to try and clean them out again this spring. Chives can be something of a plague sometimes if they become well established, and these kind of are in my garden. But the nice part is anytime I need chives, I have them for most of the summer because they come out very early in the spring. They're there all summer. So I'm just going to toss these guys in the bottom of the bowl, and we'll make sure that everything gets mixed up at some point here. So I'm going to add the chives in. I'm not going to be super fussy about this. Like if there's one loose chive on the board, I'm not going to have a cow. Moo. Okay. 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. Two teaspoons? Yeah, 2 teaspoons. I was just thinking, did I say 2 teaspoons or tablespoons? I'm used to everything being in tablespoons for vinegar, but no, I remember that this is a very mild one. I think I'm going to add just a smidge more because I have probably a few more cucumbers. Okay, and then yogurt. Now, I'm using homemade yogurt. I make yogurt. In fact, there's a video about doing it. I figured out I've been making yogurt for I think I've been making yogurt since before I was married. I decided years ago that it wasn't worth spending the money. That's good. I always check them. This is older, so I want to make sure it's nothing bad. But I totally disinfect everything as I'm making it. So usually this holds in the week, this holds in the refrigerator for about a month. Okay, and I use 3/4 of a cup. I purposefully do not use any of the whey. If you look at yogurt, there's always water in there. That's whey. And then there's the thicker spot. Just use the thicker spot. The cucumbers are going to give off enough liquid that you don't need to add more. I used 1.5 teaspoons of harissa spice blend. And if you're wondering what kind of spices this has in it, it has garlic, paprika, ground coriander, sea salt, ground cumin, ground cayenne pepper, sumac, salt, citric acid, dehydrated tomato powder, blah, 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 black pepper, ground ginger, ground cinnamon, organic safflower oil. So as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff going on. And it's the same thing that you can make from scratch, but I'm being lazy by not making them from scratch. Because sometimes I have enough to do besides making things from scratch. So I've got that, I've got this, I've got the yogurt, I've got that mint. I had to run outside. We've had thunderstorms threatening us all afternoon, and when I was trying to get the ingredients together, I kept running back out the door. And it's thundering and lightning, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to get zapped, because I have all the fresh mint in the world in the garden, but I needed to go get it. And I got the mint, and I came in, and I went, oh, and I forgot the dill, and the dill is in the bush beans, which is covered with a cover. So then I'm scooching under the edge of the cover. It was positively Keystone Cops, very silly. It was very disorganized. I think I've got a bad case of it's Friday and I've been cooking all day and it's hot. It's finally cooling down because of the storm. So let's see, I used nowhere near the amount of dill they told me to use. Peppermint, mint. This is actually peppermint. It happens to be the mint that I have in the garden. We like it. We cook with it a lot. I'm just going to make a nice pile, probably about 2, maybe 3 tablespoons. We've discussed this before, but there are things in cooking that are chemistry, where if you don't get exactly the right quantity, it simply will not do what it needs to do. It won't make the cake rise, or it won't make the emulsion thicken, or something like that. But there are other things that are a bit more on the art side, and this is basically a to-taste thing. So I have scribbles on my paper that tell me what I did last time, and Henry approved of it. So I'm sort of approximating it again, because he liked it last time. So there we go. I have a pile of mint, and I'm simply going to slice it up. This does not have to be a precise process. The only thing is I don't want big leaves and I don't want to cut my fingers. So those are the 2 requirements. This is one of those things where I feel that the smaller size bits produce like little bright flavors on your palate rather than big clumpy things. There is some heat to this, which doesn't, Henry says it's kind of in the background, like it comes and gets you. And that's okay. So this is my dill. It's wilted a little because I brought it in earlier because I was making a dill salad, but it's still fine. It's just wilted. I'm going to add about 1/4 cup of dill. This is obviously not a 1/4 cup, and it may not wind up being a 1/4 cup, but it'll be enough. Henry really enjoyed it, and he felt it was good for about, as I recall, 4 days in the fridge. Things rarely last 4 days in our fridge, but it's good to know, how long something would last. I saw a couple of different ways of presenting this. Some people keep the yogurt mixture aside and present this like as vegetables on top. Some people mix it all together. We'll just mix it all together, and this will be good. The only thing I do with the dill is the same thing I always do with the dill, which is take out the large stems. I could chop them smaller, but the delicacy of the small leaves, what they call the dill weed, is a better, more subtle thing. This was a very seedy lemon. I mean, wow, very impressive how seedy it was. A lot of times what I do is I squirt it into my other hand and then use my fingers to troll the seeds, but good lemon. 1 tablespoon of olive oil. I'm going to use a extra virgin. I'm going to do a bare tablespoon because we don't need to make this greasy. And I'm going to stir this up. And this becomes the sauce. Lots of different herbs. You've got mint, you've got dill, you've got the harissa spices, which is going to make the whole thing go sort of a pink color. And all I'm doing is blending this all together. Now the reason I want to blend this well before I put it on the cucumbers is I don't want a lump of this or a lump of that. Now, last time this didn't seem to drip very much. The cucumbers we're using are not as wet as a lot of cucumbers. So although they will lose moisture, they don't like exude huge quantities of moisture the way some do. But there's a couple of tablespoons of liquid in there. So that's a couple of tablespoons less than what would have been in there otherwise. I just gently fold this in. And it needs to sit, they recommend 15 minutes to overnight. This is what it's going to look like. It has a slight pink tinge to the sauce. And I'm just going to stick it into a waterproof container and stash it in the fridge. And it's done. So I hope you find this another good thing to use your overabundance of cucumbers with. I still have an overabundance of cucumbers, but I did make a dent today. 3 salads. I kind of got behind on making them. So be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell because I still need to make I still need to make cucumbers into something, yes. I still need to make pickles, and I still need to make relish, and a couple of other things. I have a bunch of different pickle recipes. So, until next time, bye.